Coming in at number 10, we've got a bit of an honorable mention for Maxwell Lord. A businessman of the same caliber as Lex Luthor, Maxwell has hopped back and forth between the sides of good and evil many times over the course of the DC Universe's history. And while he might be best known as a villain for Supergirl thanks to the CW live-action series, Maxwell has also been instrumental in helping the Justice League, helping to found the Justice League International following the events of Crisis on Infinite Earths, and even briefly gaining superpowers thanks to a gene bomb. However, Maxwell would soon be back to his morally dubious ways, betraying the Justice League and even killing the Blue Beetle. Not a cool way to use your new superpowers, Maxwell. Not cool at all. Coming in at number 9, we have Terra, the former member of the Teen Titans. Born with the ability of geokinesis, the ability to control and manipulate all forms of rock or earth near her body, Terra grew up as a mercenary working under the tutelage of her master, Deathstroke. And while it seemed that Terra had abandoned her past in favor of a heroic future once she joined the Teen Titans, it was eventually revealed that this was all a ruse. Terra betrayed the rest of the team so that they could be captured by Deathstroke, and while she would eventually be responsible for destroying the prison holding the Teen Titans as she began to regret what she'd done, it still was a brutal betrayal to both the Titans and their longtime readers. Coming in at number 8, we have Jean-Paul Valley, aka AZRAEL. Raised to be the next in a long line of super assassins created by the Sacred Order of St. Dumas, Jean-Paul was brainwashed for most of his life so that he wasn't aware of his own training. Once he came of age, he adopted the moniker of AZRAEL and became another dark vigilante protecting Gotham, even briefly taking over the mantle of Batman following Bruce Wayne's intense injuries at the hand of Bane during the Nightfall event. Unfortunately, his time as the Dark Knight was filled with violence and bloodshed, as AZRAEL began to descend back into his old training's ways, and it took a recovered Bruce Wayne to finally knock some sense into his fellow vigilante. Coming in at number 7, we have Phil Urich, aka the New Green Goblin. Nephew of the famous Daily Bugle reporter Ben Urich, Phil found his life turned upside down when he accidentally fell in a vat of goblin formula after finding one of Norman Osborn's old Green Goblin stashes. Taking the name of the villain, but determined to turn it into a symbol for good, this new Green Goblin attempted to be a hero in Manhattan for a time, until retiring once his equipment began to malfunction. However, Phil was desperate to chase the high of being a costumed hero, and wound up killing someone in a fight over another Green Goblin stash. Adopting the persona of the Hobgoblin, this time Phil was ready to fully embrace his true role as a goblin-themed villain. Coming in at number 6, we have Peter Parker, aka the Spectacular Spider-Man. While the mainstream Marvel version of Peter was luckily able to fight off the influence of the Venom symbiote suit and prevent himself from going full villain, there's a part of the Marvel multiverse where things turned out quite differently. Increasingly relying on the black symbiote suit to ignore all of the negative emotions and regrets that are eating him up inside, this version of Peter Parker doesn't become a dancing emo joke, but rather a darker, more violent, and completely jokeless version of himself, even going so far as to blind and kill the Hobgoblin to prevent him from even thinking about hurting anyone ever again. All of this just goes to show that maybe it's a good thing our Peter Parker took off that iconic suit when he did. Coming in at number 5, we have the mighty Thor. In an alternate universe event known as The Reigning, Thor transported the city of Asgard to float above Manhattan, only for the forces of Earth to destroy the city in an attack that cost tens of thousands of lives. Outraged by humanity's aggression against him, this version of Thor took the name of Lord Thor and began to claim the entire planet of Earth as his own, combining New York and the rubble of his old home into the city of New Asgard. By the year 2170, Thor had complete control over the people of Earth, and while he claimed that they all lived lives of happiness under his rule, Lord Thor was still determined to fight anyone who would wish to change things back to the way they used to be. Coming in at number 4, we have Professor Charles Xavier, or more specifically, the part of his mind known as Onslaught. For years, Professor X has done all he can to achieve peace and prosperity for mutant kind, while not allowing his anger at humanity to get the better of him. But over years of psychically repressing every dark and evil thought he ever had, Xavier had made the perfect ticking time bomb, and when he briefly had a mental battle with his best frenemy Magneto, a portion of Magneto's less held back personality combined with all of the darkness in Xavier's heart and created one of the most dangerous psychic creations of all time, the villain known as Onslaught. Coming in at number 3, we have Billy Batson, aka the hero Shazam. Normally a young boy who uses the power of Shazam to become one of the DC Universe's strongest heroes, this grown-up version of Billy Batson has been brainwashed and manipulated by Lex Luthor for years, convincing him that metahumans are a threat to the entirety of the world in the Kingdom Come universe. Billy would eventually be overwhelmed and use his powers again to destroy the largest metahuman prison on the planet, starting a full-scale super conflict and forcing him into a fistfight with a middle-aged Superman. And while Billy would eventually see that Lex had been manipulating him and would go on to sacrifice himself to prevent a nuclear explosion, it still goes to show that all of Shazam's powers could be catastrophic in the wrong hands. Coming in at number 2, we have the Old Man Logan version of Wolverine. Now, I definitely wouldn't say that Old Man Logan is a villain these days, but if you look back at this guy's origin story, it's just a little bit tragic as hell. In an alternate future of the Marvel Universe where supervillains have divided up the United States of America amongst themselves, it's eventually revealed that Wolverine is the reason there's no more X-Men. On the day the villains united to attack the country, Mysterio deceived Logan into believing he was protecting the mutant children of the X-Men school from evil, when in reality, he was killing his own friends and family. This was such a dark turn for Wolverine to take, even if unintentional, that he attempted to take his own life afterwards, and has spent the rest of his days trying to forget and redeem himself for what he's done. And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have the infamous Kid Miracle Man, aka Johnny Bates. The orphan child of an Air Force pilot, Johnny had the power to replace his body with that of an incredible superhero known as Kid Miracle Man, and served for a time as the classic sidekick of the original Miracle Man. However, after an explosion which led him to believe his mentor was dead, Johnny Bates aged into a ruthless corporate tycoon and became outraged when he discovered his mentor was still alive and had rediscovered his powers. Killing his own assistant to try and show the original Miracle Man just how far he had fallen, Kid Miracle Man was only able to be defeated whenever the original tricked him into saying the magic words that restored his original childlike body. Nevertheless, Kid Miracle Man would continue to be one of the darkest examples of a superhero being corrupted, and just how messy the world of superheroics can get. Coming in at number 10, we have Matt Murdock, aka Daredevil. After years of serving as the devil of Hell's Kitchen and attempting to bring justice to the streets of New York, Matt Murdock finally reached a breaking point after his enemy Bullseye destroyed a building with 107 innocent people inside. Taking control of the Hand, the antagonistic group of ninjas he'd long fought against, Daredevil declared martial law over Hell's Kitchen and began wearing a darker costume to show that he no longer cared about crossing the line of killing, stabbing Bullseye in the chest to drive this point home. And while Daredevil's drastic actions would eventually be explained to be partially caused by him being possessed by the beast of the Hand, it still didn't stop him from building a literal vigilante prison in the middle of New York and crossing several lines that he still regrets crossing to this day. Coming in at number 9, we have Bucky Barnes, aka the Winter Soldier. Originally serving as Captain America's young sidekick and friend during his earliest World War II adventures, Bucky was long thought to be dead by Cap and the rest of the world following his disappearance aboard an exploding plane belonging to the villain Baron Zemo. Recovered by a Russian submarine that discovered he was only missing a single arm, Bucky was turned into the Winter Soldier, the most feared assassin in the world for decades with no memory of his true identity. And while eventually Bucky would have his memories restored due to the efforts of an unfrozen Captain America, he still was one of the most dangerous men in the entire Marvel world for many years. Coming in at number 8, we have Jason Todd, the former second Robin and the current Red Hood. Another example of a sidekick gone dark side after their apparent death, Jason Todd was the second Robin after Dick Grayson's retirement from the role, and unfortunately met a tragic end when facing a crowbar-wielding Joker. Years later, Jason Todd would reappear in Gotham City after being resurrected in a Lazarus pit, now dealing out a brand of violent justice that would make even Batman flinch and put him into conflict with many of the costumed heroes he used to call friends. And yes, eventually Jason would have his violent methods tampered down into more of an anti-hero status rather than a villain, but he still did some pretty messed up stuff after first claiming the Joker's former title of the Red Hood. Coming in at number 7, we have Robot from the Image comic series Invincible. Initially thought by his superpowered teammates to be an artificial intelligence in a metal body, Robot is eventually revealed to be a deformed boy living in a test tube, using mechanical drones to live out his dream of being a superhero. Unfortunately, following an invasion by the Flaxen dimension in which time runs much faster, Robot is trapped within this dimension for over 700 years. During which he takes over their entire planet and begins to see the value of complete control over a population. Following his return to Earth and lying about how long he was actually away for, Robot soon begins to plan for conquering this world as well, and is eventually able to wipe out any superhumans standing in his way before the countries of the world all surrender to his drone army. From a metal teen superhero to the villainous dictator of the entire Earth, Robot has definitely had one hell of a character arc. Coming in at number 6, we have Captain America, or more specifically, the version known as HYDRA Cap. Initially appearing to be the main Marvel Universe's Captain America, this version of Steve Rogers had grown up indoctrinated by Hydra's fascist ideologies, and was actually sent to America to kill the creator of the superhuman serum for the Axis powers, but instead wound up deceiving his way into receiving the serum himself. Having replaced the main Steve Rogers during an event that restored his lost powers, this HYDRA Cap was able to hide his evil intentions until the pivotal moment that he declared to the world those shocking words, "Hail Hydra." Coming in at number 5, we have the Incredible Hulk, or more specifically, the version that would become known as Maestro. Giving himself a new name after conquering what remains of America following a nuclear winter in a dark possible future, this version of the Hulk has become far stronger than his original gamma-green form, with years of sucking up deadly radiation only improving his ferocity and power. When the real Hulk encountered this warlord version of himself, the only way he was able to finally come out on top was by literally warping the Maestro back in time to be killed by the same gamma bomb that created the Hulk back in the 60s. But even since then, this future version of the Hulk still seems to keep finding ways to return and claim dominion over the world that he claims he deserves to rule. Coming in at number 4, we have Mary Marvel of the Shazam family. The older sister of Billy Batson, Mary was a fan favorite member of the Shazam family and always seemed to have her siblings' backs. However, following an event that saw the Rock of Eternity shattered and Billy Batson having to take the role of the Wizard Shazam, Mary found her powers entirely gone. Feeling alone and useless, Mary was manipulated by the villains Darkseid and Eclipso into taking Black Adam's power instead, intending for her to become the bride of Darkseid in the process. And while this plan was eventually foiled with reboots of the DC Universe since having erased Mary's evil period of her life, this corruption still shows that in the wrong hands, the power of Shazam could be absolutely disastrous. Coming in at number 3, we have the infamous Batman Who Laughs from the Dark Multiverse. In a twisted alternate world where the Joker realizes he's dying and begins a mass killing spree of everyone in Gotham, Batman is forced to finally kill his arch nemesis. Unfortunately, at the moment of death, Bruce was infected with a special brand of Joker venom that completely flipped his moral compass, but left intact all of his intelligence and planning. All of the chaos of the Joker with the brains of Batman. This supervillain is Gotham's worst nightmare come to life ever since he first crossed over into the main DC universe, and has only been able to be defeated with the entire help of the Bat family and a God mode powered Wonder Woman. Coming in at number 2, we have Superboy Prime. A jaded version of Kal-El from an alternate universe known as Earth Prime, this Superboy was the only superpowered hero on his own world, with all other heroes merely being fictional. After this reality was wiped out during the Crisis on Infinite Earths, Superboy Prime became obsessed with recapturing his past glory as the one and only Man of Steel, and slowly twisted into a psychotic version of Kal-El, determined to wipe out every other Clark Kent and destroy the entire multiverse if he has to. All of this goes to show that Superman's power is incredibly dangerous in the wrong hands. Speaking of which, coming in at our top spot, we have Injustice Superman. Hailing from an alternate universe similar to the main DC universe, Superman was the most beloved hero on the planet Earth until a surprise attack by the Joker led to the complete nuclear destruction of Metropolis, and Superman being deceived into murdering his own wife and unborn child. Immediately murdering the Joker in his grief, this version of Superman snapped and declared himself the High Counselor and sole leader of Earth, essentially conquering the entire planet. With a resistance movement led by Batman facing against him, this version of Superman sank to lower and lower depths, and was only able to be finally locked away with the help of the Justice League from the main DC universe, going to show that the only thing truly capable of taking down Superman is another Superman. Coming in at number 10, we have the famous Scott Summers of the X-Men, aka Cyclops. For years best known as the leader of the X-Men that has to rely on a visor made of ruby to control the concussive blasts constantly shooting from his eyes, Cyclops eventually found himself at a breaking point after years of family-related trauma, Marvel's most infamous love triangle, and the constant stress of mutant kind constantly being attacked and hated by humanity. When mutants became an endangered species following the events of M-Day, Cyclops began to lead the X-Men in a more extremist direction, and following a conflict with the Avengers over the imminent arrival of the Phoenix Force, Cyclops lost control and wound up killing his beloved mentor, Professor X. And while it can be argued that eventually Cyclops' actions led to a better future for mutants, with Professor X and most mutants now enjoying the benefits of resurrection on the island of Krakoa, nearly wiping out the entire Avengers team along with your own father figure was definitely a dark turn for the guy named Cyclops. Coming in at number 9, we've got another member of the X-Men with Angel. One of the earliest members of the team, and enabled with the ability to fly due to the feathery wings on his back, Angel was unfortunately wounded and had to have his wings removed after being attacked by the evil mutant named Harpoon. Traumatized by this turn of events, Angel was manipulated by the villain Apocalypse into agreeing to serve as one of his 4 horsemen in exchange for having his wings returned. Now known as Archangel, the Horseman of Death, he fought against the X-Men until he was finally able to be knocked back to his senses by the actions of Iceman. And hey, what are friends for if not bringing you back from the edge of being an accomplice to superpowered genocide? Coming in at number 8, we have Iron Man, aka Tony Stark. And no, I promise I'm not just talking from Cap's perspective in Civil War, although honestly, Tony did some messed up stuff in that event too. No, what I'm talking about is during an event in the 90s when a variant of the time-traveling villain Kang the Conqueror, known as Immortus, began using the neural link in the Iron Man suit to secretly begin altering Tony Stark's brainwaves. Over time, Tony's morals were slowly eroded until he was an active threat to the rest of the Avengers team, and was only able to be defeated with the help of his own heroic teenage self from the past. And while eventually, through comic book magic, Tony Stark would be returned to his usual status quo, this is still an intense example of just how dangerous an armed billionaire like Iron Man could be without any morals holding him back. Coming in at number 7, we have Sinestro. While he may be best known these days as the arch-enemy of the Green Lanterns, in particular Hal Jordan, Sinestro's origins were a lot more heroic than you'd expect. Sinestro actually used to be one of the most respected members of the Green Lantern Corps, until his overseers began to notice that his sector of space was becoming more and more of a dictatorship, with Sinestro having absolute control over all the citizens he was supposed to be protecting. While he had good intentions to keep the peace, Sinestro was stripped of his green power ring, and in his rage formed the Yellow Lantern Corps to fight back against the group that he believed fundamentally wronged him. Coming in at number 6, we have the Plutonian. Hailing from the independent comic book series Irredeemable, published by Boom Studios, the Plutonian was a what if Superman started killing everyone story years before that premise became oversaturated with projects like Brightburn, The Boys, and the Injustice games. After spending years as the most beloved but mysterious superhero on the planet, the Plutonian loses his mind from the stress of his job, and begins a war against the rest of his superpowered brethren by destroying a city of 7 million people. Most of this entire series is about different characters struggling to stay one step ahead of the Plutonian's killing spree, and if you're in the mood for a dark, nearly 40-issue run with a surprisingly interesting ending, I would definitely recommend it. Coming in at number 5, we have Hal Jordan, aka the Green Lantern. The 90s were an interesting time in comics, as the medium continued to mature and tell darker stories after starting along that trend in the 80s, and it led to the attempted reinvention of multiple heroes. And just like Iron Man, Hal Jordan is someone who is taken in a more villainous direction. Following the destruction of his hometown of Coast City, Hal Jordan went mad with grief and killed multiple other Green Lanterns in an attempt to increase his own power. Dubbing himself the new name of Parallax, these rash actions would eventually be justified as being caused by a fear parasite of the same name, but for a time, Hal Jordan was one of the biggest cosmic threats in the entire DC universe. Coming in at number 4, we have Ozymandias from Watchmen. Serving for years as one of the most popular vigilantes in America, Ozymandias, or Adrian Veidt, eventually came to believe that something more drastic than heroics was needed to truly save the world. For that twisted reason, he faked an alien invasion against the world that resulted in millions of deaths to unite America and the USSR against a common foe. To do this, he needed to manipulate Dr. Manhattan, the most powerful being in the universe, into believing he should leave Earth, as to not interfere with Ozymandias' plans. And by the time anyone realized just how far their former ally had fallen and what he planned to do, he'd already done it 35 minutes ago. Coming in at number 3, we have Jean Grey, aka the Dark Phoenix. An X-Men storyline and character turn so iconic that they've tried turning it into a movie on 2 separate occasions, Jean Grey has long been one of the ideal hosts for the Phoenix Force, a fiery power that's one of the oldest in the entire Marvel universe. And while she was originally able to contain all of this power and still use it for heroics, eventually Jean was corrupted by it, becoming the Dark Phoenix and wiping out the planet of Dabari 4, ending 5 billion lives in the process. And while it could be argued this is more the Phoenix Force's doing than Jean's, you can still expect to get some suspicious glances if your powers wound up blowing up a planet. Coming in at number 2, we have the Scarlet Witch, also known as Wanda Maximoff. Originally believing herself to be the mutant daughter of Magneto, Wanda is in reality one of the most powerful magic wielders in the Marvel multiverse, and a conduit for chaos magic that allows her to rewrite reality to her will. And after years of being unsure of her own identity and the loss of her children to the demon Mephisto, Wanda finally snapped and used her reality-changing powers to declare no more mutants, kicking off a brand new era for the X-Men as she single-handedly ensured that mutants became an endangered species. Wouldn't it just be nicer to put everyone in a 1950s sitcom again? And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have the Ultimate Universe version of Reed Richards. While the mainstream Marvel Universe's version of Mr. Fantastic has consistently been a hero and inspiration to the rest of the world, his Ultimate Universe counterpart couldn't be more tragically different. Isolated with his thoughts after the disbandment of the Fantastic Four, Reed became obsessed with preventing the destruction of the Ultimate Universe, and eventually became the villainous Maker, willing to do whatever it takes to ensure his universe's survival, even if it meant the complete destruction of the rest of the multiverse. Unlike many other iconic heroes on this list, this version of Reed Richards has yet to become a good guy again, and remains an active threat throughout the multiverse that will surely come up against the real Fantastic Four again in the future.